Hey everybody out there, my name is Dragnix, and today I bring you a PC port report of Vanquish. For those of you who don't know, Vanquish is a third-person shooter developed by Platinum Games, and despite that, it's sort of a cult hit more than anything else. It didn't necessarily get great reviews when it initially came out, and it was early on in the Platinum Games lifecycle, so not many people necessarily took a chance on it. Vanquish follows in the line of third-person shooters with cover-based systems like Gears of War, as you protect yourself from enemy fire by hiding behind whatever you find on the battlefield. But unlike many games of the genre, Vanquish is a lot more fast-paced, as the ability to boost along the ground at top speed ends up changing the gameplay significantly. Between the high rate of speed and the ability to activate bullet time while you're speeding along, skilled players could feel like a combination of Genji from Overwatch mixed with Neo from The Matrix, in a game that I loved when it first came out. In fact, I was pretty depressed when I went to replay the game a while ago, something that I rarely do, only to find that I couldn't find my copy. Luckily, Sega and Platinum Games have followed in the footsteps of the successful Bayonetta PC port and decided to bring Vanquish to a whole new audience. And it comes with some improvements in several areas in the PC port. That's what this video will be focusing on. But if you want an opinion on the game itself, it would have scored a low 90 in my buyability system when I first played it. AKA, it was worth a day one purchase at the time, as not only was it something I hadn't seen before, but I had a lot of fun with the gunplay here. But let's talk about the actual performance here. Vanquish comes in at 60 FPS and above on the PC at 4K with my specs, which you can see here. Now, I am grabbing a 4K monitor soon, thanks to the new job and all, but right now, I really can't take advantage of that. So the footage you're seeing is in 1080p at 60 frames per second and above. Now to show you the frame rate, I activated NVIDIA's Shadow Plays FPS counter, and you can see it on the screen right about now. During gameplay, I felt no significant frame drops when I was in charge, firing at everything left and right. This is actually a whole lot better than the older version of the game, which was at a lower resolution and barely hit 30 FPS on the console. To say this is the ultimate form of Vanquish would be a bit of an understatement, as the PC has improved the game immensely, and it was a really good game back in the day. Now, there are frame drops here with some of the bigger explosions and light effects in the game from what I see, but it doesn't necessarily hurt the game that much. The other in-game section that showed problems, however, was the first-person walking sections that were not rendered cutscenes, which would drop to sub 60 FPS. But I really didn't mind it all that much in those cases. I mean, I wasn't fighting at the time, so I really didn't care. What's odd here, however, is that the biggest FPS drop you see is actually in the cutscenes. They are pre-rendered at a high resolution, but are 30 FPS, which sucks, but I sorta understand given the console that it was coming from. However, anytime the game decides to show your helper in her remote ship, the game almost halves its current frame rate, going down to 15 or so. It is really noticeable, and almost made me sick watching it a time or two. Also, you'll need VSync on in these cutscenes, surprisingly, or you will get really bad screen tearing. Somehow. Now, as for the visuals, they are actually a little bit better than the console version, despite not a lot of work being done on the textures or the engine around it here. Sure, there's some better shadows, and you can definitely tell the game handles low versus high quality textures in the background better, but it's the frame rate that really saves the day here in terms of the visuals. Let's move on to the controls, however, because this is one of the places that I was concerned about, honestly. Remember, this was originally a third-person shooter for the consoles, aka no keyboard and mouse. With more refinement with better controls, would Vanquish still play well at a hard difficulty, even if it was easier thanks to the better aiming? The answer was yes. The high-paced nature of the combat and the slowdown when you need to recover seem to offset a bit of the easier time aiming here. And expect to die a bunch if you haven't played the game before, because the hard mode surprisingly is hard, even for someone who beat the game several times before. Now, I'll get to this in a bit, but it should be noted that the game does allow you to really customize the sensitivity of your aiming and the camera here, so you can really get the game into that sweet spot of performance here for your type of gameplay. Keep that in mind if you're having trouble at first, as the new way of shooting along the ground can be jarring for some people. One more thing before I move on to the options menu. Note that there are several advanced options available at the command line here. In particular, the ability to adjust the FOV. Now note, this isn't an FPS, but a third-person flanking-based shooter. So you will find your difficulty probably decreasing the higher you put the FOV up. But the option is there, although it would have been nice to see that in the default options menu. Alright, let's move on to the options menu. We'll first start with the controls. Now you do have controller support here, but I'm going to focus on the keyboard and mouse support. You do have bindable keys, as well as a secondary set of keys that you can bind for each of the major actions in the game. But let's look at the mouse sensitivity here, because this is rather important. Sure, you have regular mouse sensitivity that you can adjust, but it also gives you the ability to adjust the aiming and zooming sensitivity, which is rather important because when you're dashing along the ground, that sensitivity plays a major factor in the gameplay. It is really nice to see that they put this in. Now, beyond the regular bindable keys, you have some standard options that you would expect here. The ability to turn vibration effects on and off, especially for the controller, as well as basic audio sliders, music, effects, and voice. What you would expect out of a regular PC port. Now, one thing to note here is that although you have a camera speed option in the menu here, it's always grayed out and you can't seem to change it, no matter what I do. So that's a little bit disturbing, but hey, I don't know what to say about that. Maybe it's coming at a later time. Now, you do have some other options here. You can show the score, you can show subtitles, basics here. The language, I do like the fact that you can put Japanese voices on, but still have the English translation in subtitles. But let's move on to the graphics, which is the thing that you guys probably want to know the most about. Now, you have resolutions up to 4K here, but one of the nice things that Platinum has done here is add that video memory usage at the top of the screen. You can go through each option and see what effect it has on your card, so you can really get the most out of your card, or understand that maybe you're pushing your limit in terms of the selections that you're making. In terms of the graphics options, you do have some standard ones here. Texture, low, medium, and high. Shadows, low, medium, and high. Anti-aliasing. You have Edge AA and FSAA. Now, one thing to note in terms of the graphics options. In terms of the sort of impact on things, yes, of course, resolution at 4K is going to be the biggest impact. The higher resolution you're running at, the harder your video card is going to have trying to keep up at this point. But in terms of the other options, things like the texture quality, I found that they didn't really make a huge difference. The only ones that did was the resolution, as I mentioned before, and a little bit of the shadows. Now, from the reports that I've heard from other people, in terms of like a mid-range machine, sort of an $800 machine with a mid-level graphics card, you should be able to get 1080p 60 FPS out of Vanquish. Now, you're not going to be able to get 4K, and you will struggle at times keeping that 60 FPS, but the game is definitely playable. If you have a mid to high level card, you will be just fine with 4K and over 60 FPS, probably getting up to 100 FPS or 120 FPS at certain times. Now, I am only one person who's doing it with one or two machines here. There are other resources in the description below of other people who have PC port reports of their own. And that's pretty much it. The PC port of Vanquish is pretty high up there, and it's great to see that Sega and Platinum Games are deciding to bring older games over to the PC. The success of Bayonetta on PC with over 100,000 copies sold, Vanquish should see a similar amount of games sold, considering the sort of cult status it has, and a lot of people have been asking for it over the years. And I really have to give it to Sega here, because the ports are of mid to high quality. Maybe they're not perfect. Maybe they should have gone and made all the textures and redone all the textures. At least some people may think that. but it's giving a game that people may not have had a chance to get and putting it in a reasonable place for people to play. Not only in a reasonable place, it is the default version that you should play. Even the older versions of the game don't match up to this one. So, I really have to hand it to Sega and Platinum Games here. I hope people follow their sort of lead in terms of porting games over to the PC. Games from the 360, games from the PS3 era. Anyway, this is Dragnix signing out, and on Tuesday, at least I hope on Tuesday, my Persona 5 review should hit the channel. I was hoping for Monday, but I need a little bit more time with the script, and I will do this over Memorial Day weekend. Now, like I did with the Final Fantasy 15 review, there will actually be 2 reviews that go up on the channel. A 5-minute version and the long-ass version. I understand that not everybody has the time to hear me talk about a game for 40 to 50 minutes, and it's looking like with Persona 5, it'll probably be in the 60 to 70 minute range, very similar to Final Fantasy 15. So I do want to still give information to people who want to pick up Persona 5 and still for some reason are waiting on my opinion, which by the way, go pick it up now. That's a little bit of a hint of what the reviews are going to tell you. But for the people who want to hear me really dice up the game and tell you every little element about it, not necessarily spoil things, but get my analysis of it, that's what the 60-minute version is going to be. So you can look forward to that, and I will see you all later.